Based on my personal experience serving time in federal prisons, and in contrast with the horrible images of repeated sexual assault that many have no doubt conjured up already, transgender and gay inmates are often treated quite well. Do you concur?
No, not at all. I mean, what we've seen here at Sylvia Rivera Law Project, we work with a number of transgender people and gender nonconforming and intersex people who are incarcerated here in New York State. And they are frequent and visible targets of discrimination and violence on a daily basis. A lot of people focus on access to hormones or to surgery, but there are various forms of state violence that people experience every day, from humiliation by the correctional officers to unnecessary frisks and abusive strip searches to exaggerated punishments and frequent isolation and solitary confinement. So there are various forms, again, of violence and discrimination that people face. So I would definitely not agree that trans and gay identified people are treated quite well in prison.
I mean, I wonder whether or not Chelsea's going to be given any special protection, whether or not there's a preemptive attempt by the authorities at the prison to make sure that she doesn't suffer that kind of abuse.
I mean, we have to be very careful with using the word protection, because oftentimes people are placed in what we call protective custody, but it's actually just solitary confinement, meaning that people are locked down for 23 hours a day for their protection, but the only people they have access to are corrections officers who don't have appropriate training and who are the primary sources of the harassment and assaults. And that isolation also means that the person who's isolated does not have access to programs, just to kind of busy themselves and occupy themselves. But for people in prison here in New York State and other places, these programs that they no longer have access to in protective custody are programs that kind of look good on their at their parole board hearing. So they're kind of just having less ways to get out of the system that they're in.
What would you do? I mean, if solitary isn't the solution, what would you do?
One, I would try to keep trans and gender nonconforming people out of prison.
Yeah, assuming that transgender people, like all people, are probably going to commit crimes. What do you do once they're in prison?
Well, we work on the outside to kind of create some public education around some of the acts and activities that are criminalized. And then once they're inside, we try to make sure that we break that system of isolation that the prison system creates by making sure that they are connected to what we call our prisoner advisory committee here. And these are people who provide input for policies that are being considered on the outside. They also receive postcards and stay connected to the outside community, because that has a lot to do with how people can survive inside and reintegrate themselves into society outside. And I would definitely emphasize training and monitoring of the corrections officers, because we do have policies like the Prison Rape Elimination Act that was passed, but that really means nothing if officers are not being trained and there's no monitoring and accountability.
Is there adequate accountability? I mean, are there adequate repercussions for officers who are abusive?
No, I would say no. Oftentimes we have people writing to us and saying that they reported an officer for assault, and that only led to that person being placed in isolation. Or the corrections officer who committed the assault, that person was sent on vacation, but the trans person is still locked up with all of that person's friends, so they're still facing the same violence. They also have administrative barriers, because before anyone who's incarcerated can access the courts, access these legal protections, they have to exhaust their administrative remedies. That means they have to have the courage to file a grievance in prison, which could lead to retaliation. And if that grievance is denied, they have to appeal it at least once, usually 2 times, before they can actually get to the courts.